Hi, welcome to the last series of the Latina Leadership series. My name is Angelica Casares. I am your host. This is my final series for this year. The last series, third and final series. This series next year is going to move on over to If Not You Then Who, which is my podcast. And it's going to be a sister series to If Not You Then Who. And it's going to live directly on If Not You Then Who. So thank you and welcome to the last series. I hope with this one, I bring you a little bit more insight, get to know some of the people that I surround myself with, have conversations of my family and why I started this, really, truly and really why, and why it meant so much to me to have these conversations. I hope with this last recordings that I actually bring to you part of my story, part of the reason why I wanted to do the series and why it meant so much to me. Then here you'll hear me talk to some family, friends, through them telling their story. I want to, in addition, add my story. So here it is. On this first episode, I talked to Alicia. And me and Alicia have known each other or known of each. Well, we knew each other and have known of each other. And in passing have said, hello, hi, how are you? But I think for the last couple of months, I've been wanting to get to know her more. She has a very interesting story, a story I didn't even know, right? How do you know the kind of people they are or aren't unless you're having a conversation with them? And I thought she was doing amazing things. She has a podcast also called Alicia Vibes by Alicia here on IG, and I'll link her information and all that, or all the information that you would like to know. And she has an amazing podcast. I was actually a guest on hers, but outside of my episode on her podcast, she has an amazing conversations. Go take a listen to it. I think you'll definitely enjoy Alicia. If you enjoy this podcast, if you enjoy this series, you'll definitely enjoy Alicia. So head over there and just say hi. So here it is. Here's the conversation I have with Alicia. I hope you enjoy it. Good evening, good afternoon. I'm here with Alicia. Alicia, I've been coming. This is actually a couple of times that I've been here, twice, right? Uh-huh. And we've seen each other and we've had conversations on and on. But I like to get to know people. Okay. I am the nosiest person because I think everybody has an intriguing story. And the fact, so we just recently recorded on her podcast.
Yes.
And it was an amazing conversation.
Felt like you were my therapist, to be honest.
Well, you know what? After 10 years of therapy, you end up learning how to
you were giving me some really good inside questions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, because in hindsight, everybody needs to know the ins and outs. Mm-hmm. I mean, you were amazing at the conversation. I was just being nosy. I was like, well, what about this?
No, but it was very therapeutic.
Good. I hope.
Very therapeutic.
I hope. And I hope definitely based on the conversation, I hope it wasn't too triggering.
No, not at all.
Okay.
No.
Get that. I was worried about that because it was a very listening to you, and then you pointed out some part of the conversation. Mm-hmm. And I was like, and I could tell the discomfort a little bit.
I felt it too.
Yeah, I could sense it, and I was like, I hope she's not being like semi-triggered by my conversation.
No, I wasn't triggered at all. I think if anything, it made me think of things differently.
I hope so. I mean, it was, well, go listen to the conversation.
Yeah.
I'll
Hopefully, you'll see what we're talking about.
Yeah, we can share part of the audio. And yeah, I mean, it was an interesting conversation. But Alicia, that's not where your story exactly started. Mm-mm. So I have a few questions. So First of all, you were born in Houston, Texas. Mm-hmm. What side of the area?
North side.
What kind of area was it?
It was heavy Latino inspired. Like everything was about Fiesta on Fulton. That was our store forever. It's very reminiscent of like little Mexican towns because it's the music, it's the panaderias. There's a lot of panaderias around that area. Mm-hmm. It's the bar. We lived next to a bar that would play the most amazing Tejano music, and every night they would open with the same song from Mas. Hasta el fin, mi amor. Have you heard
that? Yeah.
Vuelvo a estar contigo. And every night it would be that same song. Mm-hmm. And you know what? To this day, I love listening to that song because it reminds me of my neighborhood.
It reminds you where you came from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for those who are unaware, like you are an inner city girl. Like
I
you came from the inner city.
I did.
So you understand the struggles of what it is to be.
Oh, for sure. Mm-hmm. And I still carry those lessons in my life.
Yeah.
And I apply those lessons from the inner city into everything that I do because it doesn't leave you. Like they always say, you can't pull the girl out of the hood, or you can't pull the hood out of the girl. You can't pull the north side out of the girl. The north side follows me everywhere I go. And it's good and it's bad. Like there's things about it that I still carry that are not good and I need to get rid of. A lot of that poverty mentality, the abundance mentality versus the what is the other? That's the opposite. It's the, what is it called? It's something called abundance versus, I'll remember in a second, it'll come to me, but that's the kind of thing that still drags me down a lot of times. When I feel like I'm not deserving of something, or the imposter syndrome always pops up, I feel like, why does this girl deserve all of this goodness? She doesn't. Like, why does she think that she deserves? Like imposter syndrome. Scarcity mentality.
Okay.
Abundance versus scarcity. So the scarcity mentality is something that I'm always struggling with.
Okay.
Gosh, my allergies are kidding me. Yeah. Well, I didn't take my allergy medicine today. I totally forgot. So here I am.
No, you're okay. You're okay. So it's so difficult to get to, when I have conversations, it's difficult. And we were talking about our friend, actually, we were talking about a few friends. And a lot of the times, we kind of come from the same neighborhoods, right? Even though we're like a couple of miles apart, I feel like I get it. I know where you're coming from. I know what you're saying. And we are, I think, including a few of our friends, we've all had the opportunity to leave, right?
Yeah.
We're doing other things. Not that we think we're better. We're just doing more. I had actually seen a friend recently, because I still live in the same neighborhood. I live a block or two away from my mom. We bought a house not so far away from her. But I seen a friend walking down the street, and it was a friend that I used to like sleep over the night at her house. I remember when her last CD came out after her death. We would sit up at night, and I remember she would put on the lamp, and it would just like, it would light up the room, just with this lamp, because her grandmother wouldn't let her turn on like the actual lights, the light switch. So we're like in this yellow glowing room, and then we would just play, it was a CD that we got, and we would just play her last song. And I learned the words Dreaming of You from then. Since then, I knew the words. Like I knew them like the back of my hand.
I love that music.
Yeah. And so I seen her, and it got me thinking, because I tell this to everybody. If I... The truth is, I could really see myself like living, not doing well because of like my mental health and my mental issues. And I could definitely see myself like living under a bridge at some point in my life, because that's where I thought my life was going. So when you talk about that scarce mentality?
The scarcity mentality.
The scarcity mentality.
Versus abundance.
How did you change, or how do you realize that that's not the way it is, that it's okay to rejoice in the things that you do?
In having things now.
Yeah.
I think honestly, it's just managing my mental, my mental triggers, or my mental behaviors, or the things that pop up. Because, for example, whenever I had something good happen to me, I wouldn't share it with anyone, because I didn't want anybody to feel less than, because I know where they came from, and I knew they didn't have what I started having. When my husband and I got married, we were both right out of college. We were still kids. He was 23, I was 25. We were young. We were, a realist. We weren't idealistic. We've never been idealistic. We've always been very realistic. So we led our life in such a way that we were able to grow in terms of what we had. And the way that we did all of that was because we were raised by immigrant parents. Both of us were raised by immigrant parents. And the way that you did things and the way you function was by saving. Everything you do, you save. So once you start having money, once you start having things, once you start traveling, you start to think, okay, it's a shock to your system, because you're not used to that.
Yeah, you're like, can I afford this?
Or
should I be doing this?
Should I be doing this? I used to go shopping, and I would send things back because no, I can't have it. Like, it's too expensive. I shouldn't buy it for myself, even though it was totally possible. Yeah. I wasn't like, tapping into a savings or anything like that. It was just, we were growing. We were doing so well. He was doing really, really well in what he was doing. And so for me, it was always like I couldn't move myself into enjoying those fruits of our labor. I couldn't. In my mind, I was still having that scarcity mentality where you just save, you don't spend anything, even though there is money. You put it in the bank. You don't touch it. You don't do anything with it.
Yeah.
But I think it started.
You're gonna need it one day.
You're gonna need it one day, and it's just the way we were raised, the way we were both raised.
Yeah.
He's the same way. But I think for me, it started changing when I think I turned 40, maybe in my late 30s, and I think it was probably too late, but. Anyhow, it changed for me when I started to realize that, number one, we worked hard for it. We made a lot of sacrifices. We made a lot of decisions early on in our life that led us for us to be able to enjoy the things that we were acquiring. Number two, we were very careful about putting money aside for our kids' college, money aside for the future. We always said we were always going to sacrifice so that we could always travel the way we wanted to travel, like bougie travel. We were always going to sacrifice for that. That's what we do. That's where our money goes. Like, we live in the same house. We've been there 21 years. We never upgraded. It's always been the small little house. We never upgraded our cars. Like, we led our life in such a way that we were kids of immigrants, but then you have the ability to spend money and you don't want to. Because you're afraid. You're afraid that you may lose it, or one day it's not going to be there anymore. I don't know. There's so many things, that you're raised with in your mind.
You're led to believe that you're not, like, it's going so well that if you lose a job or if you lose something, that you're not going to be able to produce.
It's not going to be good anymore. It's going to end at one point.
Yeah, or somebody's going to catch on.
It's going to catch on.
They're going to take something away from you.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's so difficult to explain that mentality to people
it's very hard.
And the most of the frustrating part sometimes, I feel like, it's trying to explain that to other Hispanics.
It's very hard,
and they're like, and I've tried my hardest, and I try to tell them my story, because we were just talking about telling our story.
Yeah.
And I try to tell them my story, like how it was. And so even though we both come from like a very similar background.
Yeah.
We could have literally have lived next door. That's how I know, I understand when you say it was like a bar. So for example, like there was bars and like clubs around us too. El Gran Panama, I don't remember where it was, or El Rincón Norteño, places like this. And we sometimes they would have, like, I don't know if they had family night or
El Panamérica was by my house. El Panamérica,
I don't remember which one it was, but they would sometimes allow us to go. So my mom and my dad divorced, and unfortunately, it was an unfortunate situation where my dad was abusive. And so my mom kind of like kicked him out, and then she met somebody. But we would go to like the club with my mom, and we would dance on the dance floors. And I remember when I was growing up and I was a teenager, the bars were not the bars. Some clubs were still like this, where you could take kids with you. And I took my niece. And she was like, I can't believe it. Oh, the first time I ever went to a club was with you. And she was like 11 to 12. I don't remember. I was like, because I had to babysit you, and I had already had plans, and this is the place where I could bring. But I made sure she was like there with me. You know what I mean? She was like right there next to me. The same way my mom like had treated us. But it's so anyway. Going back to our stories, we were so even though we could have lived next to each other, and our references are all the same, and the conversations still tend to be the same, a little bit of the same. We were raised a little different, right? I do come from a broken home. Hey, quick interruption here. This series is actually sponsored by my good friends at Walmart. They've allowed me to have these ongoing conversations about what it is to be a Latina, and more importantly, what it is to lead as a Latina. And at the end, I usually ask most of my Latinas, do you consider yourself a Latina leader? If you're a Latina and you consider yourself a Latina leader, let me know if you do consider yourself a Latina leader, and maybe why, or tag those Latinas in your life who you know are leading and doing amazing, great things in your life. So hope you enjoy the rest of this conversation. All right, thanks. Your story, because everybody and all my friends were just like me. Yours surprises me. You had mom and dad at home.
I did, yeah.
They had a relationship.
It was a very beautiful, and they're still together today.
Yeah, that they still have that that want and need to be with each other and treat each other well. I'm sure they had their ups and downs.
Absolutely.
Treat each other well and make sure that they perceive that well. But so you wrote a book, and based probably to little girls like me who probably needed to hear some of this stuff. Can you tell me a little bit about your book?
Yeah, so it started because I was a teacher for many years. I taught all the grades, and then the last few years I taught middle school, and then the last 7 years I taught in the college level. But I always had parents asking questions, and so I would always go back to my story. And so then my dad had the idea, why don't you just write it down, and that way you can just give the book to your parents, and, they'll read it and they'll know your story and who you are. So my dad likes to take credit, that it was his idea. And so he tells everybody he's the co-author. But he kind of is, because it is really a story about him and I, and our relationship and how we got started and how we grew together, and how... it's really about how to raise an independent girl and then support her in her dreams and her goals and, reaching the next thing, the next dream that she has, and not hindering her. So many fathers tend to hinder their daughters because they just assume it's the boys that are supposed to be doing all the big things and like doing, the jobs, and not understanding a lot of times that the girls, once they're educated and once they start making money, they really lead a family outside, and they lead a family to better other things. And that's exactly what happened to me. Is the minute I graduated from college and I got a good job, I moved my parents out of the house we were living in. It was a tiny little house. There were 7 of us. It was a duplex. It was a cute, charming little home. It was, but it was just too small for us. Yeah. So the minute I knew that I wanted to leave the neighborhood, we moved, and there's a story behind the move, and there's a catalyst for the move, because I needed to leave the neighborhood. There was a situation where I talk in the other episode where I had an obsessed ex-boyfriend who wouldn't leave me alone. And the only way that I felt like I could leave him is, moving away and getting away from him so he wouldn't know where I was. And so that kind of led to that. And ultimately, the book was written in terms of like giving the fathers and the mothers, of course, lessons on how they can help their girls, how to connect with them, how to communicate with them. Sometimes, fathers don't know how to, relate to their young girls. Yeah. And there's tips in my book about relating and creating confidence in her, giving her that undying, unconditional love for her to be able to pursue whatever she needs to pursue.
And I think we touched on this like in general conversation, me and you, but there's a part in there where you talk about how you would do folklorico, right? Dance. And he was always there.
Always.
Always there.
He always made sure he drove us to our performances.
Yeah. I've had conversations with people before in the past, and they talk about the relationship with their father, how their father kind of just was there, but in the background, really not participating in people's lives, and kind of just was a provider. And even successful men do this, right? And sometimes it's, how do you tell them? How do you tell, like, hey,
to be active, to be involved,
an active participant in the family,
an active participant. And I think for him, it was more of like, number one, he and my mom always knew they wanted their kids to do this. Yeah. So it was kind of like living vicarious through their kids, a little bit of that. Yeah. And then we started to love it, and then we started doing it, and all 4 of us were dancers. And so for my dad, one thing he always did is when the opportunities came for him to grow in his job or maybe become the supervisor, he would always say no, because that's going to take me away from my kids. And I always...
So he forwent that?
Yeah. Yeah, he said that. And number one, he would say, I don't have the heart or the stomach to be a supervisor. And number 2, that would mean that I wouldn't be here with you guys as much as I am now. Because as an employee, as a regular worker, he was a maintenance worker at apartments. He was with us all the time. Yeah. Maybe he was on call, but that didn't mean he wasn't with us whenever we needed him. And so he definitely said no to opportunities of growth for him, because he knew that if he did that, it would be less time with us. And he always said to himself that he would never, ever sacrifice the time with his kids, no matter what. Like, it's not worth it to him. Of course, later on you think, well, Dad, we could have had more. We could have not been like, my mom would have not been like suffering through paycheck, But at the same time, looking back, you think those moments that he spent with us, driving us to performances, picking us up from school, being there with us, being there for me in moments when I needed him to be there. And he was at home early at 4:00 every day. I needed that. And so those things, I think, you in retrospect, you think, wow, what insight from him, to know that maybe the money would have been good in terms of like more comfort for us. But at the same time, he being home meant more in terms of our growth.
I think that speaks a lot to your character. I think that speaks a lot to the things that you do now, what you're actively doing now. And it's difficult to honestly, it's a big sacrifice to forego like moving up, because I mean you can always you can always predict like where you're actually going to end up. Like if you're like, okay, well, if I spend an hour or two away from my family to pursue this career and do more, there's no promise, there's no guarantee,
nothing, there's no
you're going to do more. But there isn't a guarantee that you're going to have a better relationship with your children. That is guaranteed.
Well, and it goes back to the idea of investing. Where do you want to invest your time and your energy? And even and in my book, I mentioned that, and I say, for a man who had a 6th grade education, that's about as far as he went in his education and schooling. There is no less life education. There's no less wisdom in that man. Because he didn't have maybe schooling wasn't there for him. He had such insight, and so did my mother, in knowing where their time and energy and their effort would have the biggest returns. And they knew that in their kids, it would mean, maybe we didn't have all of the fabulous things that most kids would have, but we had the time with them. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she probably shouldn't have been because we could barely make ends meet. But for her, it was so important that when we came home, she was there.
It matters.
It matters.
It matters who's there. I mean, because if you were not spending the time with her, who else are you spending it with? Who would you have been with? What would the things that you could have done? And that's the gambit that I kind of like forwent, because I was from a single household, and my mom did. She worked graveyard shift also as a janitor at a university, so she wasn't there all night long, which gave me a lot of liberty, like later on, like in my teens. But during the time that I kind of probably should have been looked after, was she was asleep because she had graveyard shift, so she was tired. So what was I supposed to do? I remember there was a very specific moment where I remember my mom being there. I was doing like some art contest, and I think I won like first place, and they had like something for me, and they called my mom so she can show up, so she can see me like I guess win this thing. And so I won it, and then I'm walking out, and like somebody, my mom in the corner, I'm like, what? They called her so she can attend. I'll never forget that.
Wow.
I would never and it makes all the difference for me now as an adult to know how much that meant for her to be there. So
true.
So it does. It makes a big difference. And I was segueing to like a whole different conversation, because I wanted to ask you about, so you go from there, and then you go to college, right? Against most of the odds from the same people in the same neighborhood. You go to college. What made you decide why college?
Well,
when everybody else was not.
Well, in high school, they really had great programs. My principal, Emily Cole at Jeff Davis High School, it's Northside High School now, they had really great programs where they would bring in mentors all the time. And she also had a scholarship program called the Technical Scholarship back then that became Project Grad later.
Okay.
And, they would take us on trips, field trips. They would take us to UT. They took us to A&M. So they exposed us as much as we could to the college life. So they started planting seeds in our heads, a lot of us. There was a lot of us that were going on these trips. And so, when the conversation comes up of like, you can't afford college, our counselors were ready to say, yeah, you can. There's scholarships. There's Pell Grants. You can apply for these things. And so little by little, they start to tell you, you can go to school. These are the things you need to do to get to school. This is the GPA you need to get to go there. These are the kinds of things you need to volunteer for. So they start setting it up for your life plan in a way to achieve those things. And so they kind of created like a checklist for me. And so my advisor would check it off, my counselor would check it off, and I had really great high school teachers. I mean, they didn't teach us a lot, but they were good in terms of like being supportive. And they came to teach at that neighborhood because they really cared about those kids. That was why they were there in that neighborhood, because I had English teachers that I had no idea what grammar was when I went to college. I suffered so much through that because they just kind of like assigned you a worksheet and that was it. But I had other teachers that were super involved in what we were doing. And so for them, it was important that they were support systems for us. And if I needed a referral or a recommendation letter, they were ready to have it for me. They wrote referrals and recommendations for a bunch of us kids. And we took those to our colleges. And so the colleges then started to see, wow, she comes from that neighborhood, but look at all the effort she's putting into all of this. And going to admissions by myself, my parents didn't know what to do. My mom would just drive me there and I would get out of the car and go to admissions and submit my paperwork. And I'm like, I need a check for $100. And she would have the check for $100.
That was a sacrifice. $100
it was a sacrifice back then just for registration.
Even now, $100 still sounds like a lot, but it is a lot.
It is. But, for her, it always, and for both of them, it was if their money was going to go somewhere, it was going to go for their kids. And that's it. Like they were going to always make it happen. I went on this, and I talk about the story in my book. I went on this trip, and I went to Merida for a summer abroad program, and we couldn't afford it. I had to pay maybe $500, $600 out of pocket. And my dad started collecting like lavadoras, like washing machines, and he would collect bottles and he would collect cans. And my mom would sell colchas. She would sell them, and little by little we would put money in like a little jar. I don't know if you can see, but every day they would come home and they would put money in their puppy until we finally got like the money so that I could go to school. And I think about it now and I think that's what you do for your kids. Yeah. Like you figure out a way. Yeah. They didn't say, no tenemos dinero. ¿Qué estás pensando? Like, what are you thinking that, we're made out of money over here? Yeah. Who makes you think that? They were the complete opposite. They're like, okay, we don't have the money right now, but we're going to figure it out. And my dad would he would come home in this little truck with like washing machines. He would have refrigerators that he would pull parts from to go sell them at the junkyard.
For the cost of the aluminum.
Yes, for the copper, the aluminum, and all the parts. And all of a sudden, in the front of our yard, we had like a collection of like broken down refrigerators and things like that, and parts and pieces. And then my tío found out that I was trying to do that, and he started doing it too. And then he started putting money until we were able to afford for me to go to school. But I think about those things now, and I always say, when you have a goal, when you have a dream, even today at 46 years old, I find a way to make it happen. I just do. Just my parents taught me that. You want to do it, you find a way to make it happen.
How do you, okay, so I get like, I'm getting like overwhelmed because I'm getting like very, right now hearing you, because it takes up, well, first of all, it takes up for your parents to even listen to you and be like, you have goals and dreams.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Not a lot of, usually it's like, look, I feed you, you're fine, you're alive, right? You have a bed to sleep on, you got a restroom, like you got it better. I remember would hear stories from my mom telling me like, this is what my life was like. And I was like, I don't know how to process that because that wasn't mine. How do I explain to you? I didn't even know that was my issue, that was a problem for me, right? I'd like to hear her stories, but it was always a way of like, be grateful. And I was grateful, but I was like, but what more? So, and I do.
It's a whole different approach.
Yeah. And I get overwhelmed listening to you. So besides just like knowing what you want and working hard for it, where do you go? Like, is it just like a mental like place where you go, you're like, I gotta summon the
courage, the fortitude.
Yeah.
The
fortitude.
You have to. My dad was always very good about giving us the stories of his youth. And he would always tell us a story of when he was born here and his mother was pregnant with him so that he could be born here. He was an anchor baby. He was born in Harlingen while my abuelo was working the fields in the Bracero program. And he was very good about giving us all those stories so that we always remember that when things were hard and we were not happy or not doing, there was a sacrifice that was made for us to be here. You know what I'm saying? And it's a little bit of a guilt trip.
Yeah.
A sense of responsibility in fulfilling those promises, fulfilling those goals that they set for themselves.
Yeah.
And so his goal and his dream was always that his kids would be everything he wasn't. And he's never been the jealous type. He's never been bitter about anything. If anything, he loves to see other people succeed. And so for him, it was like, you succeed, I succeed.
Yeah.
You're happy, I'm happy.
Yeah.
You push through something, I push through something too. There was always this synergy that my dad and I, and all of the kids actually, not just me, the minute we confronted some situation, he would always say, okay, you're going to confront that situation. I'm going to confront it with you. And so did my mother. My mother was the same way. It was like, okay,
they never left you alone.
what is it that you're having trouble with?
Yeah.
What can we do to support you to push forward and push? So whenever I encounter things, or whenever in my daily life I'm struggling with something, I'm not doing well with something, I always summon them, and I summon those stories, because for me it's always like, you know, you have it good. Pull it together. Other people pull it together for you. You can pull it for yourself as well.
I keep going back to that feeling. So you deported to. Can you explain what that feels like, or what that is for you?
Well, you know, it's a lot of like, you learn lessons from people when you're growing up. I think, you know, someone sees something in you, and I had mentors along the way, not just my parents, but I had really good mentors, my advisors, my teachers, and they always saw something in me, or they saw something in us as a group of kids at the high school level. And for them to invest their time and their energy in us, in who we were as kids, they didn't know, they couldn't guarantee. They could have heard the stories of like, those girls just get pregnant and get married. Why are you wasting your time on her? Why are you wasting your time on them? You know, they would assume that we would be, because we're from the barrio, we're from the neighborhood, that we were going to be just statistics at the end.
Yeah.
Here you are investing your time and your energy. She's just going to go and get married. And these teachers did not, and these advisors, these mentors for me, did not accept that. They said, no, why do we have to accept that? We can see these kids as the future, and they can be something else, and we feel it and they sense it, and I sensed it from them. When they portray that mentality, they are sending like their hopes onto you. And so at that time, you're hopeful too. You're like, you know what, I can do this too. And so then hope becomes strength. And then that strength leads you through every single process, every single thing that you go through, and you move every level. On top of it, and you carry their hopes, you carry their strength.
So you had a cute boutique. I've seen it.
Yeah.
Those there,
so
that
right,
boutique. It had like a concept and everything, like what you were trying to do with it. Yeah.
So, you know, we would host classes, we would host events. It was the concept was meet, shop, learn, so that people can come in and teach. You know, we had a few bloggers events, we had a few classes, and I used to teach most of the classes because I have a background in teaching. I became a teacher, and I was a teacher for like 16, 17 years before I pursued that. But, you know, today I work with photographers and styling. I have a resale store online. It's mostly resale because I'm kind of moving away from fast fashion and just doing a lot more slow fashion, doing my part in like recycling, upcycling clothes, and just teaching women like how to dress. With things that they already have without having to purchase more, like maybe not consume so much. You know, a lot of clothing goes to landfills. And so for me, it's always, and it was more of like a COVID alarm for me in terms of like what COVID taught me. It was like, I don't need that much.
Yeah.
I really don't.
So why the entrepreneurship?
Because I'm very independent. Okay. I like to be independent. I don't like for anybody to boss me around. I tend to not do well with bosses. I always just say I'm the boss of me, and I'm just the boss of me. And so that's really why, you know, because I do like doing my own thing. I'm very self-motivated. I really don't need anybody to motivate me. When I need to do something, I get up and I go. I do it. I set my goals. I set my intentions every day. Every intention that I set for myself, I accomplish it. I set another one. I accomplish it. I'm a goal goal getter, goal setter, someone who's very self-motivated. Like no one has to tell me to get up and go and do something. I just do it. It's just an automatic for me. It's always been that way.
You see,
ESTJ. MBTI. Do you know what that means?
No.
Okay, so that's the personality test that you take, the Myers-Briggs test.
Okay.
And so mine is an ESTJ, and that tells you a lot of like what kind of fields you go into. And for mine was like commander in chief, like you want to be commanding other people. You don't want anybody telling you what to do. So it's an ESTJ. And then my Enneagram is an 8. And the 8 means that I'm a controller. I'm a control freak. So you have to do yours to see what you are. They're pretty fun.
All right.
You learn a lot.
What are they called?
So one is an Enneagram. You have to learn the Enneagram. And the other one is the Myers-Briggs test.
Okay.
Indicator, personality, MBTI, and you just take a test online. I mean, it's so prevalent now, but they're very interesting because they're right on target.
I would have never thought. I would have never figured. I've never taken that big. I didn't start school until I was like later in like life. Not later in life. I mean, it wasn't like years later, but it was after my son. So I didn't go immediately after high school. So I never like taken like an SAT or ACT. I went straight into community college.
Gotcha.
Like, I didn't do any of that. So you started the boutique and then you started your own journey. And you make it sound like it's like so. Sometimes, Alicia, you make it sound like it's small. You're like, yeah, it's a small little thing, and I do my own thing and I do whatever. No, we're in her office. We're like in her space, and you do so much more than that. It's so much more. I mean, the podcast you do, the conversations you have on there. What if you could, if you were allowed it, where would you be? Where would you go beyond this?
Right now, if I could, and I've always wanted to do this, is do speaking engagements, do workshops, big workshops, do big coaching sessions. Yeah. I just don't want to do that because I feel like there's too many coaches already.
Yeah, in the space.
It's so saturated.
Okay.
Is that
why you started the blog? I mean, I'm not the blog. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the podcast.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're still teaching people?
I'm still teaching. It's still very educational. There's still information going on. It's trying to empower people to go and lead their life the way they want it. Like craft the life you wish to live. That's part of my podcast. I want you to craft. What does craft mean? It means setting things in motion so that you get the life you want. Everybody sees somebody's life and they're like, wow, I wonder what they did to get there. There's steps that person took to get there. You need to start setting those steps for yourself so that you get to that level. Everybody wants to be at this level. Everybody wants to go at a certain level. Everybody's like looking at other people, especially with social media. You know how that is. Yeah. Oh, she has it all. She has this, she has that. Well, there's things that she's doing. There's little intentions. There's little behaviors. There's discipline that goes into things.
I never heard that discipline. We talk about it as consistency, but it's discipline, basically.
Discipline. It's a discipline.
Do you feel you have that discipline?
I have to have that discipline if I want to do the things that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, how else do you coordinate a podcast episode, for example?
Yeah.
We talked about this.
We did.
And, we go back to it, and then I'm like, yes, I did tell Angelica we were going to do this. Let's set a date. Let's do it. Let's just put it in there. And you put it in the calendar and you say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about this, and boom, boom, boom. You're like, hey, perfect. I'm available. I'm going to bring my equipment. Perfect. I have my equipment. We're going to do my episode. And that's how you do intentions. That's how you create things.
Sometimes I feel like it's one of the things that people don't talk about is not only the intentions, but have the audacity to think that you can do it. Have the mind, the like, oh, yeah, not people weren't selected out of the air to just do certain things. Like you have to have the
confidence.
I can do it.
A self-confidence.
Yeah.
That you can do this. Fight that imposter syndrome that's telling you, who are you to do this?
Yeah. Sometimes you think to yourself, you're like, well, who do you think you are? Nobody. I don't think I'm anybody. I just want to try this. And sometimes that's what I have to do. I have to tell myself. But there's some people who are like, who do you think you are? Some people have that with innate in them to be like, I am a fucking badass person who believes that she can do it. I also believe I'm a badass person who believes that she can do it. I work at it differently because I feel like my downfalls are are, if not just as big as my upbringings. I can fall as hard, and I allow myself. The thing with me is that I free fall everywhere, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not, and so I have to be very careful. But for me, it's just having the audacity to like step forward. You know what I'm like, when people say like, who knows the answer, it's like, just throw your hand up and be like, maybe I might know what to do. I might be able to
risk not knowing it, and risk not doing well, and risk failure.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things that stops so many people from doing things, is because they're so afraid of failing. They're so afraid of looking like shit. And that's one of my fears too, of like failing and not looking and not doing things the way that I want to do them, and doing mediocre things. Because I set like a standard for myself that's super high and it's at the highest levels. But I feel if I don't set that standard high, I'm willing to be mediocre. I'm willing to just do regular basic shit. I don't want to do regular basic shit. I want to do next level shit. So what that means for me is I have to prepare. I mean, I always hear people say, oh my God, I don't really do anything to prepare for my podcast. I can't do that. Like, that's wonderful if you think that's fantastic and lovely, but I don't think your podcast has a great production value, number one. You come in with your microphones. Why do you do that? Why do you come in with your headphones? Why do you come in with your equipment?
My camera, yeah.
Why?
Because I wanted it a certain way. Yeah.
Because you hold yourself to those standards.
Yeah.
You hold yourself and you hold whatever you do to be at the most excellent next level.
Yeah.
It's the same. What is it that you want to do? What levels do you want to reach? Do you want to do a podcast that's unique and different and special, and is learning and it's teaching and it's empowering? Good, fantastic. You have to set certain things there. I research my guests. I make sure that I make accommodations for them. If I'm going to invite you on my podcast, you're giving me your time, you're giving me your energy, you're giving me something that day that you could spend it somewhere else, and you're gracious enough to spend it with me. I'm going to be super grateful. I'm going to make it as easy as possible for you, because you are doing this for me.
Yeah.
Again, it goes back to the standards and the expectations that you set for yourself. And then having the discipline to say every single time you're going to do that, you're going to do the most excellent thing you can possibly do to get to that point.
Yeah. You see, that imposter syndrome, it's so well in
you have to fight it. Yeah. I fight it all the time. And when it starts to come into my mind, I reach out to the people that I know are going to bring me right back. And that's my husband every single time. He brings me back every time, and he's like, okay, you're starting to think that you're not worthy of it. You are. You've gotten this far. You've done this. You've done that. He always reminds me of all the things that I've accomplished. You're like, this is nothing for you. Go to the next level. Do the next thing. And I'm like, you're right. Where the hell am I doubting myself? But you need somebody to pull you through.
Sometimes people remind me of the things that I've done, and I'm like, I did do that.
Right. Why are we not holding ourselves accountable? Like, we need other people to remind us. We should be remembered.
I mean, mind you, I didn't go I'm not like a NASA engineer, nor did I go to the moon. And I don't know why I keep thinking that that's the expectation that I should hit. I don't understand why I think if I reach for that, but that's not my goal. My goal is to be my better self.
That's it.
Because I know what my worst self looks like.
Yeah.
So it's always to be my better self. So Alicia, I definitely don't want to take up too much of your time. My series usually is pretty small. But I just want to ask you if you could give advice, because I have a lot of women who listen to me on here. They're Latina women. Some of them are entrepreneurs. Some of them are stay-at-home moms. Some of them are reaching their goals, trying to get their careers going, they're moving. Like, these ladies are moving.
Yeah.
If you could give advice, what would you tell them?
You know, what I would say is stay focused in what your ultimate goal is. Everyone has a big goal. Everybody wants to get to a certain place, but you have to be focused, because there's tons and tons of distractions. There's so many things that can pull at you, whether it's family, whether it's, work, money, not having resources. It's always staying focused on that end goal, and then looking at what things you need to put into place so that you can get to that point. So for me, it's definitely plan things out. manage your time really well so that you're not giving your energy to things that are only zapping you and not growing you. So for me, I'm very careful about the people that I associate with. I'm very careful about the places that I go to, because if they're not growing me and giving me a return on my time and me spending my time there as opposed to being at home with my boys, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
So it's being very protective of your time, being super protective of your brand. Also, who are you and what do you want to do, and are you maintaining your authenticity through everything, because things are always going to come at you. So stay focused, and really look at what's distracting you from your goal. And if it's distracting you, you must eliminate it and delete it from your life. You just have to. There's no other way.
Sometimes the hardest thing to do.
It is. It's hard, but I will tell you that the people who achieve and who reach, they do it in a very methodical, intentional way.
Yeah.
It doesn't just happen. I always say in my stories, it takes a ton of effort to make it look effortless. It does.
It does.
You'll come to like my events and they're seamless, but it took me weeks of checklist of going through things and making sure I have everything in order. My ducks are in order, everything, all of those things. I may not be posting them online all the time, but there is something that's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
You go to a party, you go to a quinceañera, it's a hot mess. The mom, like, nobody put effort into this hot mess that's happening right now. I walked my ass out. I'm like, I'm not staying for this.
Yeah.
You didn't put any effort in planning this beautiful quinceañera for your daughter. Why am I going to be here sitting now waiting for dinner for 4 hours? No, ma'am, I'm out. That's protecting your time.
Yeah.
But it's who you are, right? I mean, are you willing to put up with bullshit like that? No.
So yeah, it is. You have to. I'm still learning. I'm still learning that process.
We all are. You said something earlier that I think I need to tap into again. That you haven't achieved all of this. You didn't, achieve da. Why does it have to be you didn't achieve that? What about I did achieve this?
Yeah.
Stop it with the double tone. Stop it with like, I didn't do that. And turn it around. But I did do this. But I do have this. I have a successful long-term marriage. That's a beautiful thing to be proud of.
Yeah.
Because it's not easy. It is not easy. We talk about it all the time, and I'm like, couple goals, and people want to do couple goals, and everyone wants to do your life. It's not easy being married to somebody and living with them every single day. But there's a lot of things that are going on. Of course, love means a lot, and it's important. Be proud of those things. You have a son in college. Those are beautiful things. You raised a son that's in college. There's so many things. Instead of you thinking about, I didn't do that, or maybe I shouldn't be so proud of this.
Yeah.
But yes, be proud of this.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Going back really quick to something that you said earlier, when you're like, you risk a lot when you're putting yourself forward, and you have to risk failing. And I think sometimes, I just want to mention it on here, sometimes you have to risk, and I hate to make this recommendation, point this out. Sometimes you have to risk looking stupid. Because sometimes you feel like that, and not everybody sees you like that. It's probably just you who feels or thinks that of yourself. And people are like, look at her. Like, I do have friends, and I do have some people who are like, holy shit, you did that. That was great. I was like, that was a fucking fail, dude. And they're like, really? And I'm like, no, like it could have been better. And they're like, I would have never. To me, like my mom sometimes, she's like, I would have never done that. I would have never put myself in that position to see if I failed or didn't do or whatever. Like I just wouldn't have. And I'm like, holy I don't think I'm trailblazing. I just think that I do. I just want to put this out there that you end up risking, but it's all in your head sometimes. It's not. It really is in your head. People don't really think about you. Think about yourself because you're you. But people don't really think about you like that. They're just like, oh, it's okay. She'll get back up. Yeah, I can't go back and listen to my episodes sometimes because I will catch myself just criticizing my episodes. Yeah. And I have to learn to let go and just let it be. But it's really hard for me because I'm very much a perfectionist. I want things to be seamless and beautiful, or the music didn't start, or this didn't go well, or I said this word incorrectly, or I should have known better. And I can't do that because then you'll be paralyzed by your criticisms.
you yourself will paralyze yourself by your criticisms.
Just thinking about that, you'll be stuck in the past always. If you're always thinking about your mistakes that you always did, instead of like working on what you can actually do now. Like, you can't change the past.
You can't.
But I mean, if you're not living life right now, then you're always living in the past.
And people tend to do that a lot. People will tend to remember something that didn't go well, and they don't want to risk feeling that again. That feeling stays with them. That pit in their stomach stays with them forever. It is letting go of that pit, letting go of that feeling, and saying, well, you know what? If it does happen, oh well. I lived through it once. I can live through it again. You know?
Yeah.
It is. It is like that. Like, you've already gone through that. Okay, well, you can probably go through it again. I mean, it's going to happen.
Well, like I definitely don't want. Okay, one last question, and I'll leave you alone. So part of this, it's called the Latina Leadership Series.
Yeah.
And just, I want to get your quick reaction. Do you consider yourself a Latina leader?
I do.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
I do, because I think one of the things that I do is I mentor young women. And I find young women that come to me and want to be mentored and want to listen to what I have to say. And if they can leave me with something, I'm grateful for that. And that's leadership. Leadership is inspiring.
Yeah.
That's a true leader. A leader inspires. A leader doesn't sit there and dictate anything. They do things, and they inspire other people to do things.
Good. Well, on that note, thank you so much, Alicia, for giving me the time.
Thank you. This is a great conversation.
Well, thank you, Alicia. Just bye.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take this microphone with me. I like it.
Oh, I was so loud. I'm so sorry. Okay, so here's the thing. I mentioned before at the beginning that I knew of Alicia and I knew Alicia, but I didn't know Alicia in depth the way I have known her for the last couple of times that we've sat down and just conversated. The last, outside of the podcast, her podcast in this series, we sat down and just talked. I think we've talked for hours, and I just getting to know her and her story. I think this is the point. This is the point of being a human, is to know how to connect with other people and how to empathize with people. It's the rootness of what is humanity. And I'm just so happy that I had the opportunity, or she gave me the opportunity to sit down with her and just have a girl-to-girl conversation, a woman-to-woman conversation, a Latina-to-Latina conversation. So Alicia, thank you so much for coming on to my series and having this conversation with me. But if you enjoyed this podcast, what did you think? Did you like this podcast? What did you think about Alicia? Did you resonate with Alicia? Was there something she said that maybe you want to tell me that I want to continue having these conversations? So please comment, let me know. The whole point of this series is to have a conversation with you also. So I hope you enjoy that conversation, and I'll see you next time. Bye.